So yeah, we're gonna have to venture up the path here a ways, up to the Geophyte border. But once we get there, this won't be like my normal tour where I take you from here to the other end of the Arboretum and back again. It's all gonna be in about 150 feet for the most part. So it's a bit more condensed than normal. And I think I got most of the people here a handout, at least just to the general group of plants that we're gonna look at. Some of them we'll see repeatedly and just different spots within the border. And I may throw a little bit more here and there out about each of those. So if there's no beginning questions, I guess we'll just wander up. So I guess since we're at the Geophyte border, we might want to look and learn what a geophyte is. And truthfully, I haven't read this sign for quite some time. So but more or less, it's a storage organ that helps a plant get through a difficult time is the way I look at it anyways. That happens to be subterraneous. So geo, earth, phyte, plant life, more or less. So, and more or less, so we're talking about things that have tubers, roots, rhizomes, corms, true bulbs, both tunicate and scaly, as well as even, I might not see any of them right here today, but in other parts of the garden, I have ones that have swollen hypocotyls, if that is useful information to you. Swollen hypocotyls.
I don't ever want a swollen.
You won't have one. You're not. Yeah, it's the stem below the seed leaves, more or less, where they're. Yes, there is. No. But anyways, so that's some of the things, the general things, and I'll hopefully mention some of these. What most of these plants are, you're seeing, or that is, what organ they have, what structure they have that helps them get through that difficult time that happens to be subterranean in most cases. So anyways, so we're gonna go right back here because this is actually the first genus I put on your list. But I wanted to get to that sign just right there. You can look at it or later on too. But so the first plant I have here is Alstroemeria, and this is Alstroemeria in general. They're South American bulbs. They have, or not bulbs, but geophytes. They have tuberous roots on a rhizome, more or less, a short rhizome, and then the stalks come up off of that. And this one in particular, actually, I'll give you a little more information before we even get specifically to this one, is that Alstroemeria, like I said, they're from South America. There's two major centers of diversity, though they're found throughout, from what I understand. But there's a lot in Brazil, and there's a lot in Chile. The ones in Chile tend to be winter active, and so they like it in cooler times. So they're probably, I didn't look it up, but I'm guessing they're from more deserty areas where they have a Mediterranean climate, which a lot of Chile has. So they have mild winters when they're getting most of their moisture. And then in the summer, it gets hot and dry. So think of California. So they're taking advantage of the growing during the moderate times of the year versus that extreme hot and drought of the summer, they're going to sleep. So in contrast, the ones that occur in the other center of diversity for the most part are from, like I said, in Brazil, but there's lots of them in other spots, Argentina, Bolivia, and the other southern South American countries, but they are from more mesic climates where the water is much more readily available. And so they probably have a wet, dry season, is my guess as well. But it's probably in converse. It's the summers that tend to be moister. Think of when we get our hurricanes here. It's much more like here in the southeastern United States. So we have water year round, but so activity of growing, it's actually better in the summer months or the warm seasons than it is in the cool seasons to be growing. So right here, actually, getting to what I'm standing right next to is an Alstroemeria, and this is actually a florist type Alstroemeria. It was bred for the florist industry, and you can see this one. Look how nice and long these stalks are in these. They do flop over once they actually open up for us here in the garden, but I don't try to restrain them any to keep them upright. But this is one called Casablanca, and I don't know why it would be Casablanca. White house, and this is a really good, vigorous white selection of Alstroemeria, and it's been around for years. I couldn't find anything like who bred it or anything, but It's one that is available. It does well for us here. Not all Alstrom areas do well here. If you go to England or the Pacific Northwest, you'll see a bunch that don't like it here. They want the moderate climate that they have, cooler summers and things to keep them going. But Casablanca is a good one for us here. And
Do they tolerate some shade?
they'll take partial shade to full sun. And actually, partial shade's probably not bad in the hottest part of the summer. These may, this will stay actively growing almost all summer, but it will slow down in flowering. And it'll probably perk up again in the fall when it cools off a little bit again. We've had really nice weather so far this year, since we still have not had reach that 90-degree day. So anyways, this is an excellent one. And for cleaning and harvesting flowers of Alstroemeria, there's a trick to it. So you don't just take and cut things, you actually pull them. And that'll encourage it to make another growth. So if the foliage gets all ugly, you just pluck it off instead of just instead of cutting it. So you don't just cut in here and leave a long
What happens
stem.
if you cut it?
I mean, it'll just kind of sit there and get ugly. And you're going to end up pulling it off anyways. So just be proactive.
So if you're going to use that in an arrangement and you pulled it, will it still absorb water at the stem?
Oh, yes. But you're probably wanting something more like that. But these are what you see on every table. You go to, anywhere, yes. But they even also have them at Chick-fil-A. You'll see them. They have them at the live flowers on the table. You see. But this is so commonly used now, and there's all different colors of Alstroemeria. But this is just a really good one for us in our landscape, Casablanca. Anybody want a stalk? Anybody want the stalk? Okay, here we go. So. Okay, we're going to jump ahead, going really far. I said this is going to be big jumps from place to place because we have to go the whole way. Oh, just down there instead of way over there. So the next plant is right here. This is a Syningia, and I'll give you an overview of Syningia. We're going to see Syningias repeatedly. So this is Syningia in general. So Syningias are found in Central and South America. And does anybody know here what family they might belong to?
Mint.
No.
Looks like a giant.
Any of my interns, I have my four interns are here with us today. Any of them have any guesses as to what family this might be in? I don't know if I've mentioned it to them yet. The common name of the family I'll accept. Think of houseplants.
Gesneriads.
Gesneriads, yes, the African violet family.
Really?
So this is in the Gesneriaceae, and in a little over a month, I actually am talking to the Gesneriad Society. So, anyways, this is a group of. Let's see. Did I actually put how many species there were on that one? I did not for the Syningia, but there's a bunch of species of Syningias. There's some that have fibrous roots that really don't. Have a storage organ under the ground, and there's some that are semi-shrubby, and then there's others like Solovia. This thing has, if I were to dig down underneath here, there are tubers like this, or corms. They have eyes all over them. They look like potatoes. So anyway, this is probably a tuber, but Solovia is one of the hardiest ones for us here, and we'll see some other ones and some hybrids that include this later on. But what does anybody think pollinates this plant? This is another reason just to grow it.
Hummers.
Hummingbirds, yes. You see how the flowers hang down, and they're tubular, and they're orangey red. In South America, we have only a relatively small number of hummingbird species here in the eastern United States and North America in general, in comparison to South America. And since hummingbirds are the largest group of songbirds, actually, the largest group of birds in general. The largest group of birds in general are hummingbirds. These are really have big tubers under the ground. Great for us here. It'll grow in partial shade to full blazing sun. Those tubers, again, help it to get through difficult times. In the wild, I believe, where did I put for this one? Where it actually grows, what type of conditions. It grows in Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and typically in rocky outcrops, but not necessarily overly dry, but it can take fairly dry conditions. You think of a rock outcrop, it may be wet at times, but it may also be parched dry. So that again is helping it to get through that difficult time of drought or just inhospitable conditions, whether it may even be cold. But these actually do very well for us. They just die to the ground when we have cold weather in the winter, and they start coming up here till late March, early April, and we're already in full flower right now, and they'll flower pretty much all summer long and into frost. So it's a great plant for us here, and we'll see some other ones as we go on, but that's just the beginning of Syningia.
Cut them back to make them bushy.
You can see once there's still tons of buds out here that it will open, but yeah, when this part's done, we can cut it off here and it will flower here, or it'll send out buds here and there. And they're really difficult again to propagate. You know how hard African violets are to propagate. Yeah, you can take a leaf and African violet. These, I've tried leaves, and I don't know if I've ever actually succeeded with leaves on these, but these are super easy to root from stem cuttings. Aside from the fact that they do have a very large tuber. Yes.
Do you ever put them on the cart?
We do have Syningias occasionally on the cart.
Okay.
So yes, and I do give them away sometimes in the giveaway as well.
Oh,
But,
okay.
yes, but I love these Syningias, and we have a fair number. There's 5 or 6 of them here in the border now.
How
So
aggressive are they in your garden?
they're not that aggressive, though. This clump has been here since 2007. So, and I think I put 1 or 2 gallon pots in here. It has spread significantly, but I'm guessing, like I said, some of the tubers in here are probably like this if I would actually go to dig them up. And again, with these Syningias, the tubers can be relatively, I was, for getting ready for the Gesneriad Society and looking up hardy Gesneriads, I've been learning that some of the Syningias, actually, they'll often have their tubers right on the surface of the ground, while others are just a little bit below it. Tends to be the ones that have, in our climate, if they do have the tubers on top of the ground, they do need a good layer of mulch there to keep it through the winter. While the ones that are down, they're solidly hardy here. This is probably a zone 7A, 6B actually hardy, so it's hardier than here with no problem. Any other questions before we jump a little ways to the next group of plants, which is so far away?
Oh my.
Like I said, but we'll be seeing these repeatedly, and some of them are just gorgeous. Dahlias, I get people coming through the garden, and your dahlias are already in flower, especially the last couple weeks. And the first of our dahlias, I think, we're already in flower for my talk last month. So I think the first flowers I saw open this year were the last week in April. That's the earliest I remember seeing them come into flower. But they have these thick tuberous roots, and they're a little different. Yeah, so now my interns again. Now, what family are these in? You should know this one.
Asteraceae?
Yes, the Asteraceae. So, dahlias are in the daisy family. They're aster family. They're fairly closely related to things like Coreopsis and Cosmos, are some of their closest relatives, actually. And dahlias come from Central America, but predominantly Mexico. I was reading there's only like 3 species that occur outside of Mexico naturally. So Mexico has the majority of them, and there's, I think, did I read 40 some species, a little over 40 species that are currently being recognized as being true species in dahlias. We just grow a handful of them, and most of what we grow are hybrids, complex hybrids, which have been, were brought to Europe in the late 1700s. And since then, they have just been used extensively in breeding. And I'm sure many of you see these like at the fair in the fall, whenever they have the big dinner plate dahlias. For me, those are a pain. They're a little bit more complicated to keep in the garden, but these 3 to 4 footers is what I say, with semi-double to single flowers, are probably the best ones for us in our landscapes that I have found. And also with the dark foliage versus the bright green foliage, tend to fare in our summers a whole lot better. But like I said, they've started flowering really early this year. Typically mid-May is when I would expect to maybe see my first flowers. And like I said, it was the end of April this year. But they've been in flower for well over a month now, and they're going to keep on going until probably early to mid-July, and then they're going to say, I'm just too darn hot, and they're going to take a vacation. They're just going to sit here most of the summer months, that is July, August, and for the first half of September. And then as the nights start to cool off, they start to perk up. They like the cooler, moderate weather. And then they start to show off again and give us a good flowering. But again, like I said, these have a thick tuberous fruit. And I was also reading that apparently the Aztecs used them as food. And it was tried initially when they were first introduced into Europe to see if people would use them, but apparently it never took. So, and with the how the Aztecs were persecuted, they stopped using them more or less. So no one's really using them as a food source anymore. But you're going to see these throughout the border, and that's what a lot of our color is coming from right now in the border. The thing with them is and the reason I said about I like my singles and semi-doubles is flowered ones is they clean themselves for the most part. Can you pick out the seed heads here, the ones that have senesced versus the ones that are flower buds? It's a little bit of a challenge. Some people can't tell, but yes, you got the right one there. The double flowered ones hold their petals on them and they're ugly snot rags is the way I look at it. It's brown, just hanging there. But these don't look too bad. They aren't pretty, but they don't stand out excessively on the plant whenever they have senesced and gone to a seed head. And so they're easy just to come in here whenever they're ready. And when you get some time to cut them all off and just simply deadhead them. And you can go way further than that. So you can go back into the different nodes and you'll get a succession of flushes. A lot of what's in our border now are because I let them go to seed. And we have tons of seedlings in here. And some of them are like this is actually a seedling. I did not plant this one. I forget what the cultivar I was that I used to have in this, Roxy, I used to have in this area. It's not Roxy anymore, but this is my seedling of Roxy, one of them. And this has been here for probably 8 or 10 years, and I haven't done anything to it. So here in Zone 7B, we don't need to dig them. So I just leave them in the ground, and people say, don't you mulch them heavily, only if I get a chance around to it and do something to them. The tubers are relatively shallow in the ground, and they still come up every year. And if I lose one or two, it's not the end of the world since, well, you look down here, it's just gorgeous with the tapestry of colors we have right now. So,
I have another question.
Sure.
I heard there was a rumor going around that the bees don't like these. So
I get bees on them. The other day I was actually showing one to somebody and I'm holding it like this and a carpenter bee or a bumblebee landed right on the flower as I'm going like this and it did not care. I get both bees and butterflies. The double flowered ones are going to be more challenging for the bees and butterflies to get into them. Again, that's another reason to grow the single and semi-double ones because all the sexual parts of the flower where the nectar is readily accessible. So these are perfect for your bees and butterflies because everything, and there's actually a tiny little bee right here. It's it's either that or a fly, but anyways, so it's one of our native bees, not the honeybees even. But like I said, the double flowered ones, that's another reason, aside from the fact that they hold on like snot rags, to grow them, is that they aren't as good for the pollinators.
Okay.
So, and in general, flowers that are double are going to be more challenging for the pollinators to get the nectar and stuff out of them if it's still there. Because often those petals or petalloids occur as from parts of the flower that have more or less mutated into petals versus the sexual parts of the flower where the nectar and pollen might be actually normally at. I know. Normally you guys have to, you can't keep up with me. You bring your pedometer and see how many steps you get in whenever you come with me to do a tour. But today, nope, we're concentrated. So my next plant here, I'm going to talk about some of the xanthidicias, or what is a common name for these? Calla lilies, yes. They're not lilies, and they're not. Calla is a different genus, actually. It's related to these. It's an Araceae. It's actually from much further north. It's a cool climate plant and wetlands in the northern hemisphere, probably in northern United States, southern Canada, even Europe. You'll get Calla palustris, I believe, is the species. But that's the true Calla. That these are xanthidicias. And at times they've been, originally they were lumped into the genus Arum, which both and my volunteers here and my interns even, they know that we have lots of Arum in the garden, and these aren't quite like that, thank goodness. But they do look like they're relatives to Arum, and it's not a wonder that they were placed into the same genus for a long time. But they are in what family, interns? Shout it out. Araceae, yes. So the Arum family. So the foliage on these actually looks a lot like the Arum italicums, which are winter active for us here in the garden and have naturalized in the garden, but much prettier flowers. And this is one called Mango right here. They're complex hybrids. I couldn't find anything out about the breeding of these. Most of them have been done for both the floral culture industry, whether for pot culture or for cut flower, and less so for our gardens, but there are some that do very well for us. There's two main groups of the Xanthodias. There's ones that have, there's about, I think, 9 species. I have to look at my sheet here, my cheat sheet. No, 8 species. There's about 8 species that have been recognized, and 2 of them, one of them, the most common ones is Xanthodecia aethiopica, which is the big white callas that you see used for floral or wedding arrangements pretty often. That one actually has a rhizome, while all the other the 6 other species that have been recognized are pretty much, they have a true tuber, including these. So, yep.
What's the difference between a rhizome and a tuber?
That's a swollen, that's a good question. A rhizome tends to have, it's a horizontal stem typically with multiple nodes that along the side of it, and it's a subterranean horizontal stem. Tuber is a swollen other structure, which I didn't think to look up my terms this morning. I should have before I did this. It might actually say a little on there. I don't remember on my sign, but so there is a slight difference apparently between these and these other 2 species, which but these come from a tuber, and so I don't think these go horizontally as much. These are much tighter clumping as well, so underground. The stem is underground on either case, so on these. And what you're seeing is just the leaves and the flowers. You're not seeing the true stems. So, but these typically look nice for us here in the early summer. The colored flowered ones, not the Aethiopicas. They are typically more winter active for us, and so, or cool season active. So you'll see them mostly in spring and fall. These, like at early summer, and then they take off most of the season. Then they go dormant quickly. Great cut flowers, and for the Araceae, so what you're appreciating on them is probably not the flowers in reality. This is I don't know if we can see these here, but we have a spath and a spadix in here. I'm not going to rip this apart, but if you take the time to look down inside those, you will see there's the spath is this modified leaf, which is colorful in this case here, and down inside you will see the actual flowers. So there's an inflorescence. There's not just one flower in there. There's actually, probably 20, 30, who knows, maybe 40 to 100. They're just tiny, and they are down in there. And then there is an antenna to release, say I'm flowering, and have a pollinator come in there as a part of it. And that's part of the spadix. So you have the spath and the spadix. And so that's where the actual sexual stuff of the flowers are. And most of your Araceae is that way. So the Arum family, and they can be boys and girls, or they can be hermaphrodites. So I don't know if I don't know, and I don't know if the calla lilies are hermaphroditic, or like our native Erasemas, for instance, they can be boys and girls, but one year they can be a girl and the next year they can be a boy, or vice versa. So they do their things a little differently. So this looks like it has a girl here, but I don't know if there could be boys down in there as well. So
like opportunistic? Oh, this year it's better to be a girl.
It could be like that. Stress induced things will change the sex on them as well. So on some of them, and it's like, last year, I'll try this next year. Or they can have both. you know, some species do. So these are also related to things like a lot of your house plants. Does anybody have a spathiphyllum or a peace lily in their house? Yeah. So that's same morphology. Or does anybody have a Swiss cheese plant, a philodendron, a devil's ivy? So those are all related to this. So elephant ears. For those of you from the Northeast or the Pacific Northwest, skunk cabbages are also, and our jack in the pulpits, are all related to the callas or the xanthodiches. So anyways, so behind me, I don't remember which one this is. I didn't look. Oh, this is Claude Davis. But anyways, and over here, and these aren't flowering right now. So not everything's in flower, but you're going to see bunches of things in the garden right now. We have crinums that are already starting at it. And we passed a gorgeous one as we came up the sidewalk, and I just blanked on its name. Anyways, so these are great big true bulbs. They are tunicate bulbs. So this is what you think of as a daffodil bulb type bulb on here. And they are, crinums are found all over the subtropics and tropics worldwide. So crinums, C-R-I-N-U-M. So crinum. So anyways, they are monsters in the border here in reality. They're enormous most of the time for us. They're some of the largest of the plants. Let's see. I'm thinking they're probably placed in the Asparagaceae now. I didn't check to see where they're putting them, but I'll say they're in the Amaryllidaceae. So does that make connection for you? So amaryllis, which what we call amaryllis when we have our pot plants at Christmas, are not amaryllis. They are hippeastrums. And I have those in the border here too, but they're finished flowering for now. So to confuse you, but they are all related. So crinums, like I said, they're found all over the warm parts of the world, including 1 or 2 species in southeastern United States. I know there's at least Crinum americanum, for instance. But these are mostly complex hybrids that we're looking at right here. And I didn't look up Claude, but I did look up White Queen over here. White Queen is a cross between Powellii and Powellii elba, I should say, pardon? Oh, it's not. That's not related at all in reality. Easter lilies are not related. So it's crinums. But this gorgeous white one over here is White Queen, and that's Crinum Powellii elba, crossed with. Let me see. I have to see if I can make sure I say it right. Which one? And then Macauanii. That's what gives it these really graceful, drooping flowers that once they open, they kind of hang down like bells. It comes from the Macauanii side. Those are Powellii in itself is a hybrid. It's a cross between Bulbospermum and Moroii, which are both South African species of crinum. And then Macauanii is also a South African or Southern African species. A lot of those have been what has been used in our breeding. And so I'm guessing this probably has Bulbospermum in it, which I have a Bulbospermum at the end of the perennial border if you want to see one that's more of the straight type of that. But these are just getting going right now. There's tons of buds right here that are just popping up. And also, I don't know if you can see, I saw this a little while ago. I don't know if I can be very careful here.
Oh.
So we have a brand new hatched out adult pipevine swallowtail, which brings me to my next plant. So there's ground cover down here.
Tim, before you leave that.
Sure, no, can't talk about it.
I'm guessing based on this tree that this gets sun afternoon only, maybe?
No, this gets sun all afternoon. It doesn't get morning sun, yes.
Yeah, so,
but they prefer full. The more sun you give a crinum, the better.
well, the reason I'm asking is I have a couple that
They don't flower.
They didn't grow a lot.
Yeah, but once they get like succession, they won't die.
Right.
You can't it's hard to kill a crinum. They won't die, but they will stop flowering and kind of just dwindle away till just there's something surviving there. If they're in the shade, they will sit there, move it into a sunnier spot, give it a little extra water. They are very, reward. They'll respond to reward very well. So give them light and lots of water, and they'll grow like crazy.
The other thing I was wondering was about whether they were just either too deep or too shallow.
They'll adjust themselves, and that's the great thing about a lot of your geophytes is those plants will get them to the right depth of where they need to be. Even if you were a little bit neglecting them whenever you put them in, as long as you don't put them too high up and then they have a cold spell and they get killed because the structure was not deep enough and it didn't get enough insulation from the cold. That's one of the ways you could kill such a thing. But if you overplanting a little bit deep on most of these is not going to be the end of the world. So back to my transition to pipevine swallowtail, from pipevine swallowtail that's right here, and there's fluttering around here off and on if you keep an eye out. There's this ground cover I have down here that has the kind of the kidney-shaped leaves and veins, all silver veins on it. So that is Aristolochia fimbriata. It's the only thing I gave you the whole Latin name on because it's the only one I'm going to talk about specifically in here. And it's really cool. And this is one, a lot of pipevines. We have native pipevines, but this is one from Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay. Again, the same South American region as a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about this morning, it seems like. But here's the flowers. And I don't know if...
It looks almost like an orchid.
Oh, no. Morphologically, no.
Oh.
No, It does look like a pipe, like a Dutchman's pipe, and you see it in profile. So, but anyways, really cool things. And there's a bunch of species. We have native ones. Some of them are quite large vines, like our native Aristolochia, I think it's macrophylla, which you'll see in the mountains, and is our native, one of our native sources of a host plant for the pipevine swallowtails that are going all over in here. But again, this is one of the South American ones. But the vining ones often get a little bit unmanageable in your landscape. You need to have a really good structure for them. And a lot of them are, the other ones, the really cool ones are tropical. But this one I love. It's a great ground cover. It kind of sifts itself in among things. And it has this really cool flower. But you have to beat the caterpillars to them to see them. But I don't care. I want the caterpillars. I want the full. So this is, again, this is the pipevine swallowtail caterpillar. So, pipevine. So Aristolochia fimbriata is pipevine, and this is a pipevine swallow. So, hence, that's why I was showing you butterfly back there. And if you keep an eye right over there, there's a pair of them. They're all over here. And I don't worry about them eating this. So going back to geophytes, the reason I have this in this border is because these have a large taproot, which is swollen like a carrot, more or less. And that helps it recover whenever its caterpillar, the pipevine swallowtail caterpillars come and eat them to nothing. In a few weeks, there won't be any visible pipevine in here. They will have eaten it all, but they will recover. They actually keep my pipevine in bounds because if I didn't have them, I'd probably have only pipevine in here. So it's a good mutualistic association, I guess you might say. And the pipevines are a little bit on the toxic side. They're chemically really reactive. So they give that characteristic to the caterpillars and the butterflies themselves. They're a little bit not the tastiest to the birds, apparently. So the birds ignore pipevine swallowtails, the adults, and the caterpillars. But as a result of that, there's been a couple other butterflies that are mimics of the pipevine swallowtail. So black swallowtails look very similar. Our native, the local forms or the southern forms of tiger swallowtails, the females often look more reminiscent of a pipevine swallowtail. They'll be black. They won't often have the striping as distinct and more black than yellow. And they're mimicking this as well. Spice bush swallowtails, again, very similar coloration. And then when it's not a swallowtail, the red spotted purple. All have butterflies that look very similar to the pipevine swallowtail as a means of mimicry and hoping that the birds won't find out that they're actually much more tasty than the pipevine swallowtails. But anyways. Any questions about that? So you can't just plant. The trouble with, and I was actually, I reviewed what Tony Avent has to say about on their website about Aristolochia fimbriata, and he says if you want to have the pipe vine swallowtails, you really need to have a bunch of pipe vine. They will eat it all. And but they will recover no problem, like I said. So you really shouldn't just plant one. You have to plant dozens of them. I did start with one clump in here. And years ago, and it's 2/3 of the border now has pipe vine in it. So, but one of my favorite butterflies and plants in this border. I'm gonna set this back down here. So, okay, where was I at and how much time do I still have? I might not get through our whole list, who knows? Okay, let's just go right here. This is, since I actually have one in flower. Last week, if you had been here, I had more in flower, but we're gonna look at rain lilies. So the Zephyranthus and Hebranthus, which I grouped on your sheet there, at the very last plant on your list. And there's actually one that's fairly consistently flowers, so it's not extremely spectacular right here. So, but anyway, Zephyranthus and Hebranthus, again, they're next of kin to the little plant that we talked about just before the Aristolochia. What was that? Crinums, yes. And what family interns were they, or what plants are they related to? Crinums? Yeah, what were they related to? Amaryllis, so the narcissus. And again, deer do not like that family very much. So, yes, and rabbits don't even bother that family very much. You know, so it's like you plant your daffodils and you plant your, snowdrops. Don't plant tulips. They're going to eat those. They're candy. They're not related. So anyways, these are again related to the amaryllis. So down here, I'll get one of these. The flowers on the rain lilies only last a day, 1 to 3 days. Or actually, I have one species, it might be 6 hours to 3 days. Anyway, it's not flowering yet. It's the giant one down here, minimum. The flower's about 3 or 4, 3/10 of an inch across, and the seed pod is bigger than the flower whenever it forms. But it only lasts about 6 hours. But anyways, it's along here, all along this edge here, you'll see what looks like grass coming up. There might be a little bit of grass mixed in, but most of it is actually rain lily foliage that you're seeing. And so rain lilies are found in southern United States. We have our own native species here, the Adamasco lily. You might see those in flower around Easter. Typically in late March, April, we have them in the wet woods around here. But there's a bunch of other species. There's roughly 200 species of Zephyranthus and about another 30 species of Hebranthus. And I've lumped them together, and actually this is actually a fairly good illustration here of one of the characteristics that they use to differentiate between them. So this is Hebranthus robustus right here, and this is a Zephyranthus flavissima. And does anything stand out there? And how
the robustness of the
not that now, but look how the flower is oriented. This is spent here. So most of your Hebranthus are going to have a crooked neck. And if I would dissect this flower here, all the stamens on the Zephyranthus are all the same length. But all the stamens, if there were still some in here, probably there could be, there's 4 different lengths. The Hebranthus are a little bit haphazard. They aren't as precise. They don't stand straight up, and they don't care if they're the right length or not. That's one way they differentiate them. But I have a couple species of Hebranthus in this border. Which we have at least 3 I can think of. There's Tubispatha, Florii, and robustus. Robustus is probably the most robust, the most vigorous in our border, and it self-sows everywhere. Yep.
Sorry, look at the...
Oh, and yeah, we have a knoll and posing for us over here on a Hymenocallis, which is actually, I didn't put it on your list, is very closely related to your crinums again. So, and to your Zephyranthus and Hebranthus as well. But so rain lilies, again, they're North and South American. Most of them are in Central America, though, of the Zephyranthus, and I think more of the Hebranthus are in Central or South America. But they repeatedly flower off and on, a lot of them anyways, throughout our summer months. When we often have a rain or a change in weather in the summer. It might just be a pressure variation. They don't 100% know what actually induces the flowering, whether it's the rain itself or a pressure or who knows. But they take advantage of that because they're often from semi-arid areas, especially this one doesn't, I don't think is, and that's why it just flowers a little bit all the time, this Flavissima. But some of them are from semi-arid areas, so they get periodic rains. They don't get it consistently. So they take advantage of that rain when they get it, so they quickly flower within 3 to 5 days after a decent rain, a lot of them. And then they quickly produce seed. And drop that seed down so that it matures within just a matter of a couple weeks, and then they germinate the next time there's a good rain. So
do they spread like crazy?
they don't spread like crazy, but they do often spread. I don't get actually a lot. I don't see Flavissima going everywhere, but I didn't plant many of these along this edge. They were put in a few spots along the edge, and they have gone here and there. Like I said, there's that giant one down here, which I don't think it has flowered yet this year. Minima, which, I mean, like it's giant. Is that Francie's? I planted it all down here originally, and I now have it down here as well. So, and I have Tubispatha, Hebranthus tubispatha, which I don't, there's a few of them open. Oh, no, there aren't. I'm seeing an oxalis, but there were last week. They have spread all over in the center part of the border as well. So, but any questions about rain lilies? So come back about 3 to 5 days after a good rain in the summer, and you're bound to see some rain lilies in here. Any questions?
What is in here that's a geophyte that we wouldn't see until a different time of year?
Oh, there's lots of things. I'm not showing you the daffodils right now. The scilla, the, let's see, I have Ficaria in here. I have, they're starting to go dormant, or the Dracunculus vulgaris, their cool season. I do have tulips in here. We have Iphions. There's a bunch of cool season geophytes too. We're focusing on the warm season geophytes right now. Any other questions? Before we go down here to this far, isn't it terrible? You're getting tired of walking, aren't you? So my next plant is down here. I have an oxalis. And you probably have oxalis at home whether you want them or not. I'm guessing. Do you have wood soil coming up as a weed in your yard? In your pots? Probably. This is one here. This is oxalis tetraphylla, and this one's typically called iron cross. And so some people will call the oxalis shamrocks. They aren't related to clover, though they kind of look reminiscent of clover pretty often. But this is, like I said, this is iron cross. There's a couple different forms of tetraphylla, and this is one of the most distinct and well-known, with the dark patch in the center of it. So, anyways, oxalis are found all over the world, pretty much. Though there's some centers of diversity in Africa and South America in particular. And some of the coolest ones that we can use in our gardens come from those areas, and including, actually, tetraphylla is a Mexican species. And there's a little one right here. This is Lasiandra. I'll break off the tip where I was chewing on this, but I like the flavor of it. And actually, you can pass those around. There's 2 different species there, but oxalis have oxalic acid in it, and it's technically classified as a poison or toxic, but we eat it in a lot of different things, like broccoli is one that I was reading, and spinach. And for me, rhubarb. And I miss my rhubarb, and I'm going to miss it because it won't be good when I go home in about a month or so. Or actually, the end of the month. I don't think they'll be any good. But I love rhubarb. And this has the tang of rhubarb. It's all caused from the same chemical, oxalic acid. It's great, actually, in small quantities. It's fine for you to eat. Apparently, the Native Americans made a kind of a dessert out of it. I didn't read much, but it sounded, I couldn't find much, but it sounded like it reminiscent of rhubarb, if you've had rhubarb. And so I nibble on this occasionally, and it supposedly quenches your thirst. And I've been talking a lot, so maybe I need a swallow of water, and I didn't bring any. So anyways, back to the wood sorrel and oxalis. So those are two of the ones. These are both Mexican species in reality that I have right here. Tetraphylla, yeah, in Central America and that. Lasiandra is only found in Oaxaca, Mexico area, which it has more leaflets on the top of its leaf. And they have, the species we're growing here typically grow from a corm. So a corm is kind of, it's a subterranean stem, typically vertical-esque. And there's buds on it, axillary buds going up it. So it's kind of like a tree branch for all intents and purposes. It has buds along it. And the leaves come up off of it. So we're only seeing the leaves and the flower stalks on that. We're not seeing the entire plant like on a dahlia. And they have pretty flowers, but I grow most of the ones in here for their foliage in the border, though. The flowers are a bonus as far as I'm concerned. This Lasiandra has not grown at all over the years. The Tetraphylla is readily available now, but it does like to spread a little bit. It's over here. And we'll see another one down here, hopefully, if I don't talk too much. So let's see here. And while we're at it, oh, this is a perfect time to show you a repeat. Isn't this lovely? It is actually lovely. That's the cultivar. This is Syningia Solovii crossed with Syningia tubiflora, which I don't think I have in flower right now, which is down at that end. Syningia Solovii is the one you saw down here. And Syningia tubiflora, well, sounds like the flower is? It's long tubular. It has long tubular white fragrant flowers that open in the evening and are very, like I said, fragrant, pollinated by moths. Lovely also has that characteristic. And you'll see another one actually right over there that's similar. It's called Arkansas Bells, which they're both the same hybrid, but actually done by the same guy. But the characteristics are a little bit different on them. This has a longer flower, and it kind of flares out, while Arkansas Bells has a little bit shorter infloret actually, and it typically holds it straight down. It also has a light fragrance. These do spread a little bit more than Solovii. Solovii is big plant, but and big tubers, and so it does spread just because of its size. These are smaller individual plants taking after their tubiflora hybrid parentage, but these like to kind of run a little bit once they get established, but not in a bad way. So there's like potatoes under the ground, and I might, if we get a chance, go over there and dig a couple out and show you. But just while we're right here. So, yeah, and we also have another Xanthodecia over here that in review. We have another calla lily. This is Paco. And again, I couldn't find anything about Paco. It's one that probably, again, was developed for cut flower trade or for pot culture. It's a little bit more compact than mango. So hiding in here, they're not doing their thing yet, but in various spots, I have pineapple lilies. Right in the foreground here and here. There's sparkling burgundy over there. So those are eucomis. And those are now being lumped into the Asparagaceae, which I didn't even put asparagus on my list, but I have asparagus in this border. So everything is in the Asparagaceae, I think, now that used to be in the Liliaceae. Or in this case, Hyacinthaceae, which I still like that family name instead of Asparagaceae. It's a little more specific. It's in a subfamily now, but Cilioideae or something like that. But these are really cool. These are just coming into bud right now. You're seeing the foliage. And does everybody know what a pineapple lily looks like in a flower? They're really, I have some probably in other parts of the garden, but they're not flowering in here yet. But the inflorescence, so it depends on the species, but you have flowers and then you have a tuft on top. So it kind of looks like a pineapple. Nothing eats them. This one's actually starting to push its flower buds right here. These are seedlings. I didn't plant these right here. So nothing will touch these. The squirrels, the rabbits, the voles, nothing will touch the eucomis. They're great for that. And they're really fun. You can propagate them in a fairly unique way by leaf cuttings. So you can cut a leaf off, and as long as you put it in the soil the right direction, you can cut it up into pieces actually, and as long as you put it so that the plant nose is up and down, if you put it on the downside down in there, it'll root and you'll get bulbils. So it takes a few years to get flowering sized plants, but they do grow readily that way. But these are wonderful cut flowers for us here. They actually often last longer as a cut flower than when I leave them in the garden and we have 95-degree days. And they just say, I hate this, and they start to senesce. But you keep them in the house for a month or more, and they look the same. So, and they'll even set seed in the house. I've had it inside. So, but that's just a quick touch on the eucomis. And we're going to jump over here. These aren't open yet. This is one of the lilies that we have in the garden. This is a super vigorous one. This is Lilium Black Beauty. So I'm not going to tell you too much about lilies, other than they're not related to the crinum lily or the calla lily. These are true lilies. They're in the Liliaceae. Your crinum was in what family? The Asparagiaceae or the Amaryllidaceae, and your Xanthodices were in the Araceae, which is the arum family. Not related at all. I think the Liliaceae, it might even be in a different order now than the other ones. So anyways, but they are monocots. So anyways, this is one of the later flowering hybrids we have in the around in the garden. But this is Black Beauty, and the butterflies adore this. This is a cross between an oriental type lily and one, I have a few left over here that are starting to get shaded out in the Asian Valley, called Henryi, which is an orange, looks like a tiger lily. And it's a super vigorous, great cultivar for us here. So this will be cream in dark burgundy, almost black, so hence Black Beauty on this one here. But these hybrid lilies, any of the oriental trumpet lilies, this type here, which is an oriental crossed with a Henryi, which is not a trumpet lily, so I won't use that. There's so many lilies now that are great, and we do have a bunch. I planted some new ones that aren't going to get big this year, but they hopefully will flower a little bit down at this end, where I had some holes from where some fizzled out over the last 15 years. So replaced them. They got in the shade of our holly hedge here, so pulled that back in. So, but just wanted to touch again on lilies. Who am I forgetting? Who have I not talked about? I think I may. Oh, Hedychium. Hedychium. They're not flowering yet, at least here. I might have. I don't think I have any in the garden yet, but I wanted to mention them. So ginger lilies, and again, not related to lilies or calla lilies or crinum lilies. They're in the ginger family, the Zingiberaceae, which is more closely related to the Cannaceae, so the canna family, and the Musaceae, the bananas, which those are also really good geophytes. But I do have a canna down here, but that is self-sown in here. But yeah, they tend to be very vigorous, and so this is already a tight area, so I have not incorporated too many of those into this border. But they all have, the Hedychiums all have a very vigorous rhizome, much like your cannas. But this is a really cool one because it has variegation to it. There's another mutation from this one. This is called Dr. Moy, and it's kind of a creamy pastel yellow with a darker center. It fades to almost an orange in the center. It's a Hedychium coccineum crossed with Hedychium flavum. But, and I think they are technically edible, much like your ginger. Your true gingers, your gingerbur, or your hidden ginger, which is curcuma, which is turmeric, I believe comes from that, if I remember correctly. But anyways, this will flower in probably another month or so, and later in the fall is when, late summer and fall is when you get most of the Hedychiums doing their thing. But again, this is one, it's just really nice for its foliage as well. Vanilla Ice is an improvement on this one too. Not as vigorous growing, but it has much more white to speckling in the leaves. Fragrance is something also that I associated with the Hedychium, so they give you great fragrance. So, let's see. So I've gotten through the minimum I wanted to get through here, but well, I'll point out a few more things since we still have some time. So here's another of our Ulstramaria, and this is one, the trade name of this one is Jazzy Rose Frost. I actually grew this one for years in a pot because where I'm from in Western Pennsylvania, it wasn't hardy. And this one was developed for pot culture, actually. It's a seed one from Pan American seed, and so its real name is really catchy. Its real name is PAS 2052. But in the trade, it's Jazzy Rose Frost, and there's a whole Jazzy series. There's like 3 or 4 different ones at the time, but we've had this one in various spots in the garden for years, and I added it back into this border actually only about 2 or 3 years ago. But it's doing its thing right now. It's a little more compact than that of Casablanca. So, but you can grow it just the same way. And they recommended, actually, someone earlier asked, do you want those in sun or partial shade? And they actually recommended partial shade for Jazzies. But again, it's one that makes a really good pot plant as well. In the pot, it'll only get about 12 to 15 inches tall. So it's much more manageable than, say, Casablanca, who gets quite large. So, and again, I mentioned this, when we were down there. Now, this is the Arkansas bells. And I said that the one parent on this tends to spread a little bit. So it is now over here, and it was planted over here, but it's now in this dahlia. So, and I didn't put asparagus on my list, but here is my asparagus, and I included it on the list. But I didn't include it on the list, but I included it in the border because has anybody ever dug up asparagus or had an asparagus fern in a pot? And it has a really thick, fleshy root system as well. So we were able to incorporate that in here. And this is actually a pretty cool one from Southern Africa. This is Asparagus microrhapis. And I don't like regular asparagus, but I do eat this one when I'm in the garden. At this time of the year, it's not as good, but first thing in February or late February, March, when it starts to push new stalks up, it's like candy. It's like snow peas. It's much better than regular asparagus, but it's only a fraction of the diameter. But if you find a really tender part right now, you can get a little bit of essence of that, but it's not like it is in the spring when it first comes up. But this is one. It was from wild collected seed that we got years ago from Silver Hill Seeds in South Africa and grew out. And it is self-sowing a bit in here. And it sets fruit. It has white flowers when it does flower. But the people who collected it, and I can't remember their names right now, but about 4 or 5 years ago, they were apparently carjacked, and they never actually found their bodies. They think they were fed to the crocodiles. So it was kind of a sad thing. But
You might have to repeat that. I didn't quite.
they were fed to the crocodiles. Is what they believe is what happened. The people who collected this. So in South Africa. So anyways. And as we're just going down here, we're surrounded by dahlias. And I didn't mention any names on dahlias, but there is one down here I will point out real quick, because I do. This one is still a valid one. This yellow one is Mystic Illusion is the trade name, and Knockout is the cultivar for it. This dark leaf yellow one here. And then these are seedlings around it. I like that one there. But, and down here, yet another Syningia, since I do like my Syningias. This is one called Bananas Foster, and this is one that Tony Avent selected from some seed he got through a seed exchange with the Gesneriad Society. And it's a really complex hybrid. It has tubiflora somewhere in its bloodline, and has 4 or 5 other, or probably 3 or 4 other species involved there. But it's just a really cool one. Flowers the entire season, and you can see it's not bashful. It's great big. It does its thing. And we have several others in the garden that I've been growing as well. And just to quickly add on another couple favorites here, I showed you the oxalis earlier. Here's the other. This is the tubiflora. Syningia here, and I'll see what I can find if I go in here. If I can find something here. So there's the tubers. And who wants a tubiflora? This has a very fragrant white flower. You don't count. So this is one of the hardiest species, supposedly into zone 6. But white flowers about this long and very fragrant. It only for us ever gets about this tall, but it does, if it's happy, it spreads. It goes from back here to over here. So, but also in the foreground here is what I walked over here for, is another oxalis. This is oxalis triangularis, and there's a couple forms I can show you in here. I planted Mike here, which this is M-I-J-K-E, which does not have, it's totally a purple leaf, no pattern to it, and it has a pink flower. And then it's probably a mutation from this one is my guess. I didn't look it up. This is Atrapurpurea, which has near black edge and then purple in the middle. And then over here is Fanny, which is a green one with a silver splash and pink flowers. In other parts of the garden, I have one called Irish Mist, which has a bigger splash of silver in it and white flowers. And I get a few seedlings. It's not weedy like the yellow weedy oxalis that you pull out of your garden. I say you probably have in your garden, as I think we all do. Though where I do grow multiples, I do clones. I get occasional seedlings, and and I have one I actually have selected but haven't given a name yet. So, but they do get rust in this time of the year. That's the only problem with this species. But it'll be active anytime it's above freezing, more or less. As long as we aren't having really cold weather, below frost, hard frost, this is growing. And I grew this species as a houseplant for decades back home, and that's where most people grow it as. But down here in the southeast, we do get rust. This doesn't have much on it. I don't know if you can see the orange on that. I know there's, pardon? I don't treat it. But in the summer, it'll get rust on the leaves. And the ones over there really have it down pretty bad right now. But you can chop the foliage back and it'll reflush in a few weeks. And if you're growing it as a container plant, it's a great one if you go on a lot of vacations, because if you go away and it dries up, it's not the end of the world. You just peel off all the dead leaves and then start watering it again. It'll come right back up. So, but again, it tastes good. You can use it as a garnish in a salad. Because it's pretty and it gives that tang. Yes, but this has flavor too. That radicchio is pretty, just a green flavor. If anyone wants to try, take a leaflet off there or some of the stem, and you want to try?
I'll try that, yeah. Is it more flavorful in the stem or is it in the...
I don't know. You can break that up. It's really tart.
It's real tart.
I like it. Like I said, it's like rhubarb. So we're going to see that surprise for those of you. Some of you probably have already seen it. We're going to go visit the largest geophyte we have in the garden right now. I think everybody's here who's important. My interns are just lagging behind. But this is Amorphophallus titanum. So this is the plant with the largest undivided inflorescence. So it's not just one flower. It'll have literally hundreds of flowers here in a couple weeks on a large inflorescence that might be, we're guesstimating it'll probably be around the, I think they were saying the 18th to 20th, maybe somewhere in that range, that it might open just after our symposium that we're going to have. It's the guesstimate. This is on loan from on campus, and they don't have a good place. They've had three actually lupin, who flowered 3 times now in the conservatory, but it's so tight in there, and it's hard for them to display it and get people through. So they asked if we could put it out here. So this is a new one. This is Wolfgang. I'm not sure. On the wolf theme is lupin and Wolfgang, wolf. So anyways, this is a seed, was grown from a seed they got from Ohio State. So I don't know how old he is now, but he's flowering for the first time. It's extraordinary in that they typically don't flower with a leaf. So this is not a trunk. This is a leaf that you see here. One leaf, that's the leaf petiole, like that white stuff I was chewing on my oxalis, is much like that. This comes like the same type of structure as that oxalis. It's coming from a corm. This has a corm down here, which is a modified stem with nodes. And that leaf is coming up off of one of those, the nodes, and then the flower bud's coming up off of another node. But they typically don't flower with a leaf. So come back over the next couple weeks and watch Wolfgang grow.